Hey guys, Venruki here with Team Method. I want to bring you guys a quick video. Legion is about to hit, and I wanted to go over the three mage specializations, Arcane, Fire, and Frost, and how I think they stack up in PvP, going over some of the advantages and disadvantages of the three specializations. So to start off, we're going to talk about Arcane. Some of the advantages of an Arcane Mage over Fire and Frost is that they are highly mobile. They have an ability called Displacement. What Displacement does is it allows you to rewind a blink. Typically with Fire or Frost, depending on how you talent, you have either one charge of blink or two charges of blink. With Arcane, you obviously have one charge or two charge based on which spec you are, if you're spec into Shimmer, but you also have an ability called Displacement, which lets you rewind in time and then blink again. So you effectively have 4 charges of blink instead of just the 2. So that is really, really strong. Another big advantage of Arcane is mass invisibility, which I think is a great team utility. Not only do you have greater invisibility, which allows you to go invis instantly, whereas with Fire and Frost it has a fade time, you also have mass invisibility, which stealths your whole team. It's a PvP talent, so I think that would be great team utility, not only in Arena, but as well in RBGs and World PvP situations. Another thing Arcane has going for it is it has a 100% increase on the amount that Ice Barrier absorbs. Frost also has that, but that's something that Arcane and Frost have over Fire. Another big advantage is the Mage Armor that Arcane Mages get. It's exclusive to Arcane, and that is a 25% duration reduction of magical effects. So if you get Polymorphed, 25% less automatically. If you get Feared, 25% less automatically. That is very powerful for not being crowd controlled as much, especially if you're playing with a talent like Relentless, which inherently reduces the amount you're already crowd controlled. That stacking with Mage Armor makes it really, really difficult for you to actually be CC'd, because everything is effectively like 30-40% less on you just automatically. Another big advantage of Arcane over the other specs is I think it has the highest survivability. So when you combine the high mobility as well as the greater invisibility and mass invisibility, I think it makes Arcane Mages the hardest to kill in pretty much all situations in Arena, duels, World PvP, BGs. You can just get away. You're very slippery. So if you think that sort of like slippery playstyle is fun, Arcane might be the spec for you. Some of the disadvantages of the spec is that it's reliant on casting to get off effective damage. So outside of your cooldowns with Presence of Mind and Arcane Power, and maybe like your Berserking if you're an Orc, it's just when you're free casting Arcane Blast and Arcane Missiles, your damage isn't that strong when you compare it to something like Fire. That being said, I still think it's higher than Frost, but yeah, just something to keep in mind. It also has less crowd control than Fire. So one of the things that Fire has over Arcane is that it has Dragon's Breath, and that's something you miss out on if you are playing Arcane. Dragon's Breath is exceptional for getting polymorphs onto a healer in Arena, for just escaping if you have melee on you. Being able to Dragon's Breath them and blink and run away is really good. Being able to peel for your teammates, so that's one of the utilities that you miss playing Arcane. And lastly and finally, I think the biggest weakness to Arcane is that it only has really one effective school that you cast from, so they're very, very vulnerable to interrupts. As a Fire Mage or a Frost Mage, if you cast Polymorph, you can now cast Frostbolt or cast Fireball. As an Arcane Mage, if you get interrupted on Polymorph, you don't do anything. You just kind of sit there. You can Ice Barrier, you can Frost Nova, but nothing really super effective. I think that in and of itself is what I think turns me off of Arcane the most. Moving forward, we have Fire. Now Fire is exceptionally strong. Looking at some of the advantages I think it has over the other specs is it has the easiest and highest sustained damage to get off. So not only do you do the most damage, but I also think it's the easiest to get your damage off. You have a lot of instant cast pyros. With Tinder, you have the fast cast fireballs, and it just makes it so when you do need to cast, you do a lot of damage, and when you can't cast, you still do really good damage. So I think that's my favorite thing about Fire, is just from a damage point of view, it's the easiest to get off your damage and probably has the highest DPS on average in Arena games. Another advantage is, like we talked about earlier, Dragon's Breath. Fire by far has the most crowd control. Dragon's Breath has a 20-second cooldown. It's a 4-second AoE disorient, If you have melee training your healer, you can Dragon's Breath them off. If you need to go sheep a healer, you can go Dragon's Breath Polymorph them or Dragon's Breath Ring of Frost them, and it's just insanely good utility. I think it's one of the best abilities in the entire game, not just for mages. With Molten Armor, we talked a little bit about Mage Armor for Arcane Mages. For Fire, they have Molten Armor, and it makes it so they take 16% less damage from physical sources. So you are inherently just more tanky. Although I think Arcane is more survivable, you can get away with just sitting there, tanking, planting, and doing damage as Fire Mage. So that is actually really good. So if you're sitting there and you're rotating your polymorphs and your fireballs to try to get off damage and you have melee beating on you, you're going to be harder to kill than a Fire or Frost Mage. I think that's really strong. Not only that, when a Fire Mage blinks, he gets a 15% heal. In PvP, like instance PvP, it's 7.5%, but still almost a 10% heal every single time you blink. When you have Shimmer, you have 2 charges of blink, so you can blink quite often. It ends up being quite a bit of self-healing, which is really, really strong, especially in duels, in arenas, and in BGs. So yeah, because of the heal and because of the Molten Armor, I think, like I said, Fire Mages are the most tanky. Another big advantage to Fire Mages is they have multiple effective spell schools. So what I mean by that is, like we talked about earlier a little bit, if I cast a Polymorph as a Fire Mage and I get interrupted, I can now just cast a Fireball and I can get off damage, which is really, really strong. Whereas as an Arcane Mage, you can't really take advantage of that. Fire has 3 schools, so not only do they have an effective Fire Tree with Fireball and Dragon's Breath and all their abilities, basically. They have an effective Arcane Tree with Counterspell and Polymorph, and Frost with Ring of Frost and Frost Nova, which is really, really strong. So it feels like even when you're being chain interrupt over and over and over, you still have stuff you can do, which is probably the thing I like most about Fire. In terms of disadvantages compared to the other specs, I actually think Fire has no disadvantages at all. The only thing would be you don't have the 2 invisibilities that Arcane has, but that's really nothing. So yeah, disadvantages for Fire Mage, I don't think there are, and it's a really, really good spec. And I think of the 3, it's probably my favorite at the moment. And finally, that brings us to Frost Mages. Some of the advantages of Frost Mages, if you want to call it that, is I feel like it has the greatest one-shot potential. So if by some miracle you can line up Shattered Frostbolts over and over and over, and you can build up big icicles, especially if you can store them. So if you can use your Ice Form, store up icicles, then wait for Ice Form to come off cooldown, and you can get a big crit Glacial Spike and cast more Frostbolts into it with your Ice Form, then you have the highest one-shot potential. Unfortunately, it's exceptionally difficult to get off. It's incredibly unreliable, and I think when you fight good players, people that are equal skill or maybe even better than you, you're going to rarely get off those big Glacial Spikes, and it can be a very, very frustrating way to deal damage. Another, I guess, advantage of Frost Mage is you have a 100% increase on Ice Barrier. This isn't totally unique to Frost, like I said. Arcane also has this, so yep. You have an increase in your haste because of Ice Armor. So Fire has Molten Armor, Arcane has Mage Armor, Frost has Ice Armor, and what Ice Armor does is I think it increases your haste by like 6 or 7%, and it also makes it so when you are attacked, you are slowed. So if you have a warrior beating on you, they're just inherently slowed. Another advantage, I guess, is they have the most powerful snare that mages have. I think it's a 70% snare on Cone of Cold that lasts 4 seconds or something like that. So you have a big snare. You don't necessarily have more Novas, but you do have a ranged Nova. So right now, most mages spec Lonely Winter, so you do not have a pet, but if for whatever reason that changes and all of a sudden mages can use their Water Elemental again, then one of the advantages you have over Fire or Arcane is that you have a ranged pet Nova, which can be really strong. And the reason for that is, say you are in an arena game and you're trying to help your teammates survive, and you cast a Polymorph on a warrior and he gets dispelled. You can immediately drop your ranged pet Nova on him, and now he can't move because there's no way he can get dispelled out of it. So I guess that is another advantage for Frost Mage, and that's really it. Those are the 3 things. In terms of disadvantages, as I feel like a lot of their damage, like I talked about, is kind of semi-random because of Black Icicles. And what Black Icicles does is your Ebb and Chill, your weapon, has a chance to empower your Icicles to deal double damage. So if you get a lot of Black Icicle procs, you can do really high burst, but if you don't get a lot of Black Icicle procs, you just don't really do that good of damage, which is unfortunate. Like Arcane, it's also very reliant on casting in order to get off effective damage. So yeah, if you're being trained, it's really, really hard to get off any sort of significant damage. I guess one of the nice things about Frost is you can be kind of tanky, and even though you're not necessarily getting out that much damage, you have a lot of crowd control. Everyone's snared when they attack you. You can blink around and just spam polymorphs, and you kind of just, at this point, Frost feels like a polymorph bot, and it's really hard to get off your damage, like I said. Even if you are chain casting as a Frost Mage, outside of cooldowns, so if you don't have Ice Form up and you don't have like Novas to shatter into, spam casting Frost Bolts it doesn't do anything. Like, the damage is very, very minimal. Unfortunately, I feel like it's kind of like Arcane. It has a problem where even when you're casting, you have very, very low consistent damage unless you have all of your cooldowns up, which is unfortunate. Another disadvantage is you have less crowd control than Fire. You don't have that Dragon's Breath, although you have a little bit more snares. You don't have Dragon's Breath, which is the CC ability that mages have specifically for Fire mages, and I think that's why Fire is just so valuable right now. Another thing is it's just less tanky than Fire, so we sort of talked about sitting there planting. Even when you can't get off your damage, you can still just spam out polymorphs and snares and try to control the team while your team mates get out a lot of damage. But I think at the end of the day, Frost is just worse at that than Fire. So because Fire has less damage from physical sources and they like have blink heal, it just makes them the most tanky and most desirable. So Frost, probably the worst of the three specs. If I had to rate them right now, I would say that Fire is absolutely the best, Arcane is in second place, and Frost is in dead last. I don't really see a reason to spec Frost at all right now. I think that there'll most likely be some changes to Frost and Arcane because right now Fire is just the best at everything. So if you want to own in PvP, I think at this point Fire is definitely the way to go. That being said, there could be changes. Fire could get nerfed, Frost could get buffed, Arcane could get buffed, and I think at the end of the day, play the spec that you think is the most fun, because I don't think Blizzard will abandon the spec. So if you are diehard Frost Mage, or you think Arcane Mobility is super fun, it's a super fun, awesome playstyle, play those specs and see how it goes. But right now, Fire is definitely the safe bet. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions regarding the specs, feel free to leave a comment. If you like this video, feel free to leave a thumbs up. And yeah, I'll see you guys later.